Welcome to the E.A.T podcast. I'm your host, Jerry. This is episode number 13. Tonight on the show, we have Steve Kournianos. He is known as the Draft Analyst. His Twitter handle is at the Draft Analyst, and his website is thedraftanalyst.com. He's a big hockey guy, and we're going to get talking about our favorite sport in the NHL. Here we go. Steve, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. Looking forward to this.
Oh, I'm excited. I'm very excited. So let me ask you, before we get started, just where did you grow up and how big of a hockey fan were you before you got into the draft analyst gig you got going on right now?
Born and raised in Brooklyn, if you can't tell by the accent. Lived there pretty much all the way up until I was left for college. And hockey was always kind of like the fourth sport for me in the beginning. I was always a big, baseball, Yankees, football with the Giants. Definitely I'm an all New York guy when it comes to my teams. I don't like the Cowboys and the Lakers like a lot of kids that I grew up with.
No Dolphins.
Yeah, that was that. It was every kid that with the last name Marino, like, yeah, damn Marino was my cousin. And then I had a cousin who lived out on Long Island, and he had season tickets to the Islanders. He was a big Islander guy. And I don't know why. I just started watching the Rangers, and it became a lifelong obsession, probably around like 84, 85. And played street hockey with all the kids in the schoolyard and the public schools, like most kids did in Brooklyn at the time. And like I said, it just slowly but surely, as the Yankees started sucking and the Giants were kind of going through some things, and then it was the Knicks and the Rangers became my teams. And of course, with the Rangers, being the best team in the league a couple of times, winning the cup. So I always liked sports, and I knew I wasn't good enough to make it. I was a good athlete, but I just wasn't good enough to make any of the teams or anything like that. So I figured, why not just get into sports writing so I could stay close to the game? So that was always a dream of mine from a young age, that I wanted to be a sports writer, newspapers, magazines, whatever. And, I went to school for journalism, wrote for the school paper, and always had a hockey angle. It's actually funny. When I went to Northeastern, I got a job in the hockey information department. This was in this off season of 94, 95.
Oh, and good time.
Yeah. And so Ben Smith was the head coach, and there was this new guy that looked familiar to me, but he was always walking around Matthews Arena, the rink there for Northeastern. And he was always popping into the office being like, hey, you got to skip for this team. You got this, that. And I had no problem. It turns out that guy was David Quinn. He was an assistant to Ben Smith at Northeastern. Yeah, and then he ended up moving on to BU and coaching the Rangers, and unfortunately, he's not the coach there anymore. But so hockey's always been number one for me. I'm a nut. I eat it, drink it, sleep it, breathe it. Got every book you could think of. Watch old games, watch new games. I mean, so the prospect
I'm
thing.
really excited for this now.
Oh yeah. The prospect thing is just like an offshoot of it that developed. I covered the Bruins for about 2 years for Sports Ticker in the early 2000s as a beat writer. Well, more like a stringer / beat writer. So the NHL stuff I already did, but I was always into the draft. So, and started the blog in 2014, and here we are today.
Yeah, I was looking at your blog earlier today, and I mean, you cover drafts going way back and everything that's on there. It's not just the draft. I mean, you cover the playoffs, you had a recap, you have a whole bunch of different things there, and it's great. I mean, for anybody who's not aware of your site, definitely go check it out at thedraftanalyst.com. There's a lot of good info there, a lot. And specifically, let me ask you, this draft class, I mean, we had COVID, and certain leagues didn't play, certain people didn't see players, scouts weren't traveling overseas or into Canada. What do you think the biggest difficulty for this draft is going to be with the COVID backdrop for the past year or so?
I think that the biggest thing besides the OHL not having an entire season, which is a big deal, because that group, whether it's a strong group from the Ontario League or a mediocre group, they usually make up anywhere from like 25 to 40% of a draft, depending on what year you're talking about. So that's huge when you have no OHL season.
Yep.
We only had a quarter of it or a third of a WHL season. We had no WHL playoffs. We had no Memorial Cup. I mean, I could go on and on about so many key benchmark events where you take these kids and you take them out of their comfort zone. You take them out of like league play where they're used to the coach and they're used to everything. And now they're facing tough competition where draft stock can matter, more scouts, and the not having like 4 or 5 really important international tournaments was huge. We usually start them off in like early July. I used to make a post on my blog that would be a calendar, like all the events that I usually watch, and it's like 15 to 20 between North America and Europe, and none of that happened. None of that happened.
It's unbelievable.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Oh, they're all coming back. That's the good news is that they're all coming back. But what particularly for the 03 year group, that this draft is basically it's their year. Yep. It's tough. It's got to be tough for the kids because now for next year's going to be a normal year. The 03-04 is going to be the class, the birth years, but now you're going to have all these kids who didn't play in the OHL. Now they're going to have to be, I guess, involved in this draft class who are over ages. Like they're basically 1 or 2, 3 years over eligibility. It's crazy. It's crazy. So, the draft is luck. It's not a science.
I was just gonna ask you. So with all of that being said, do you think a lot of teams, like I guess a couple of years from now, we're gonna look back at this and go, a lot of teams reached, or a lot of teams were ill-informed, or didn't have the normal means of scouting these prospects, and you're going to look back at this draft and go, well, hey, this team should have drafted so-and-so, or this guy fell 10 spots when that shouldn't have been the case if people were really scouting him. Do you think that's going to be an overdrop with all of this, is the inability to scout, so to speak, compared to years past?
I mean, you could use hindsight all you want, but I think everyone deserves a mulligan for this year. They really do.
Okay.
So, and in addition to that, we didn't have a consensus number one. We never really had a moment. If you want to count the under 18 World Championships, that's really the only event we've had for these kids. And I guess like 80% of the top 10 or my top 10 weren't even eligible to play there because they were late birthdays. Mm-hmm. So, they were basically 18 plus, where the U18s is for 17 and under. Mm-hmm. Or almost just turned 18. So not having all these benchmark events, not being able to see all these kids compete, it's really messed up. So we all play the hindsight game. We're all guilty of it. Say, I can't believe we drafted and didn't draft David Pasternak, 2014. I get it, but with this
Hugh Jessamine back in the day with the Rangers.
Well, that was different because he was the only one out of like one of the greatest drafts in history.
My God!
We could criticize the Rangers for that one. But I think in particular, the only team I think that has it really tough right now is Buffalo, because they're such a mess. There's so much like toxicity in that organization, and all the infighting and the bad news and the bad vibes. And now, by the way, we won the draft lottery. We're the worst team in hockey, and it's a draft that you could say we kind of have now we have a consensus number one, Owen Powell, but the Sabres fans, most of them, they don't even want him. They're like, well, we have left defensemen. We'd rather take somebody else. So it's crazy.
Yeah. So let's just give the calendar out to the people listening real quick. The NHL expansion draft is going to be July 21st. The NHL entry draft is going to be July 23rd and 24th. And then free agency is going to start July 28th. So I'm going to ask you about the expansion draft and free agency a little bit later down the line. But the next 5 weeks of hockey definitely have to be something that we're all excited about as hockey fans. You have both semifinal series that are definitely going 6, if not 7. But you just touched on Owen Power. He's being compared to Victor Hedman, 6'5", just over 210 pounds. He's only 18 years old, and not every scouting outlet has him number one. Do you think Buffalo is definitely going there? And I know they have Dahlin as the other defenseman, who's big back there. But if you put the two of them on their blue line, is that the way that they're going to build their team out now? Or do you think they go somewhere else with that pick? And let me preface it with this real quick. If you're going somewhere else, is it because Eichel is getting dealt?
Well, I think, it's, I always say that the NHL draft is not the NFL, where your player's not going to step, even if it's a number one overall pick. And we've seen it with Jack Hughes. We've seen it with Alexis Lafreniere. Outside of, Austin Matthews and Connor McDavid and, maybe a couple, Pat Kane, a couple other examples. It's very rare for a 17 or 18-year-old kid to step right in right away, losing organization, especially specifically with the Sabres. I mean, they're a mess, and make basically the culture and change the franchise. I mean, that's a major project, reconstruction project going on in Buffalo. So I think that they will walk away with a really good player no matter whom they draft. But yes, you're correct. They have Rasmus Dahlin on the left side. Owen Powell's lefty. They have two really good lefty defense prospects in Matthias Samuelsson, a big physical kid, and they have the other kid, Craig Johnson's kid, Ryan Johnson. And then they also have the kid, Jacob Bryson, who's like a undersized puck mover who played a little bit in Buffalo last year. So in theory, yes, they're loaded on the left side. But if you draft Owen Power, you could make the argument that he would automatically be their best defenseman, more so than Dahlin, which is crazy to think. Yeah. Although Dahlin did play a little bit better at the end of last season, and maybe the new coach and the new, I guess, the new way forward, I guess, for Buffalo is going to help Dahlin. Or even if he's a 1-to-1A situation, then you have the potential for two elite pairings there, and then you could maybe deal Samuelsson or deal Johnson to get help. But I think that he's the consensus number one, Power that is, but I don't think that the Sabres are necessarily guaranteed to take him. I think that they need more help in goal and in the forward ranks, and if they take a goalie number one overall, the fan base will probably keep in mind. But it's probably the smart thing to do. It's just probably the smart thing to do. And I talked about it in my podcast today, how they've only drafted two goalies in the last 6 years. How could you draft only two goalies in 6 years when you have one of the worst goaltending stats in that time period? Like,
it's unbelievable.
We'll solve our problem with Carter Hutton. Yeah, that'll fix everything.
And honestly, Buffalo's not a place where a lot of free agents want to go. I mean, sure, Taylor Hall went there last offseason, but that's, cold winters in the middle of nowhere, basically, is not where the star guys want to go. So you're going to overpay, and that's going to be a problem. Keeping these guys down the line is going to be a problem as well. But for argument's sake, I just saw an article in The Athletic a few weeks ago, and it quoted Power as saying, right now I'm probably leaning more towards going back to school. It's something I'd like to do, just trying to get the true experience of playing college hockey. At the end of the day, it obviously depends on what the team wants and what everyone around me thinks is best. Let me ask you, do you think getting drafted first overall, he's going back to school if it's Buffalo?
I mean, it would be rare for a kid to do that. We haven't had that since, I think, Eric Johnson, who's a defenseman who went first in 2006, where your number one overall pick is not on the team. I mean, it's almost like disappointment and a letdown for the fans. It might, usually when you get the first overall pick and the team wants to promote them, it helps with season ticket sales. We all know that the owners have lost a ton of money, that anything, money from anywhere would help. So I don't think that helps Buffalo. At the same time, you have to, look at all angles and say, is this a little bit of posturing on Power's part and from his camp? Mm-hmm. Usually kids like that don't make that comment unless someone told them to make that comment, whether it be his family or his agent.
Yep.
And so that's not that. Usually the kids say the canned answer, like, I'll be honored to play for any team. I can't wait. And I watched Power in Michigan also. It's not like he needs to go back to Michigan, improve his game, or mature. He's a really mature kid. I mean, who knows? He might have a girlfriend there. He might have a really good time. Maybe he wants to get a degree. Who knows? But if I'm a Sabres fan and Sabres management, I don't like that. I'm like, all right, we think that you probably our number one overall pick is going to be better off here with us on the all control. He, if he gets hurt with us on the contract, which is the other side of it, which is like, it's kind of rare that a kid is like, well, because he's not allowed to collect money if he's on his ELC and playing in college, he can't sign his ELC.
Yep.
So maybe that's his way. And my gut, to be honest with you, like speculation wise, my gut is telling me that's his way of saying I don't want to play for Buffalo.
Which is understandable. I mean, people don't go there. It's understandable. Let me ask you real quick, just to finish out the whole Buffalo talk. Jack Eichel. So he's got a herniated disc, so it seems. One idea is possibly having surgery, which, if that's the case, talking spinal fusion. Do you think that surgery is going to happen? Do you think he's going to get traded? Where do you think will he get traded at the draft? Where do you think things end with Eichel, and where is he next season?
I think he has to get traded. I think it's enough of his complaining to the press about upset and how disappointed he isn't gone. I get it. He has every right to be upset. He's a great player. He become, an all-star more so than he is now at another franchise. I mean, who knows? But he's been there since 2015. They've never made the playoffs. Yep. They've never had a winning season. They're always drafting the lottery. They're always rebuilding. They've had a ton of GM turnover, a ton of coaching turnover. So I think he's frustrated, but he has that right. I mean, he signed the big contract, and I think that was the right thing to do. But at the same time, he wants out. It's clear that he does not want to be there anymore. And now you have this new wrinkle with the disagreements in the medical situation, where he says one thing, his camp says one thing, the team says another thing. And then you also have the I guess the sources or the contacts for the other teams that want to drive the price down. Like, oh, well, he's really hurt real bad, and this is a rare injury, because they want to drive the price down. Whereas the Sabres like, no, he's fine. But anyway, I think he's gone. I think he's traded, and this is just based on a lot of reports from people who are well more connected than I am. I think that the Sabres are in a no-win situation. Not going to win the Eichel trade. Maybe 2 years from now, we could look at it like the Knicks Porzingis trade, where everyone's like, oh my God, the Knicks lost the Porzingis trade. You traded away your franchise player. And now the narrative is like, oh my God, the Knicks really, really won that trade. So,
seriously.
Yeah. So,
all right. So there hasn't been a big blockbuster deal in the draft lately. Going back, you look at Ottawa, Colorado made a trade that ended up with the 4th overall pick being swapped, but that really wasn't a draft day deal. You had Boston, who passed over Matthew Barzal 3 straight picks, and the Islanders swooped in and made a deal with Edmonton. That was franchise altering. Do you expect a big trade to happen this year? Well, we lost Steve. That's not good. We lost Steve's feed. Hopefully he's coming right back. Here we go. All right, we got him back. He's
found I had to refresh it.
Here we go. All right. So my question was, I don't know if you heard it. There hasn't been much in talk of a blockbuster deal lately at the draft. You had Ottawa and Colorado made a trade not too long ago where the 4th overall pick ended up being exchanged, but that really wasn't a draft day deal. That was a conditional with Duchesne. Yep. You had Boston, who passed over Barzal 3 straight picks. The Islanders swooped in and made a deal with Edmonton. That trade was franchise altering, as I just stated. Do you anticipate anything big coming down the pike this draft? Are there any teams, let's say in the top 10, top 13 or so, that are shopping their pick that don't want to pick where they are?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know, but my gut tells me they are, specifically because of well, here's the thing. It's kind of like twofold. Number one is that the drop-off outside of like the first couple of prospects. I mean, we don't really know how these kids are going to turn out to be, but it is like a thin draft based on our usual metrics, right? Whether it be dominant tournaments, how they do with the World Juniors, their role in the league, how much they dominated the league. It's not as you don't have as many options this year as previous years. It's also not deep in center iceman. So the fact that there aren't a lot of good centermen, that it's relatively thin, considering one of the worst drafts in the last like 7-8 years. You would think that GMs would be more inclined to trade the pick, but maybe not necessarily the guys in the top 10. So maybe you'll see teams want to jump from, let's say, 20 to 15 or 20 to 11 or something like that. But at the same time, a lot of these teams that are picking in the top 10, they're probably tired of rebuilding. They're probably tired of, you look at Anaheim. They've never really gone 2 years in a row, back-to-back years where they've been bad. And this is a legit rebuild in Anaheim, right off the heels of this run that they were on, where they were always in the conference finals or winning the division. San Jose, I think they haven't had back-to-back losing seasons since they were like an expansion team in the early 90s. I mean, they always seem to bounce back from a bad year and move on, like immediate adjustments. So, the state of a lot of these teams picking early, their prospect pools are pretty good. Detroit is loaded. Right. They have they've drafted 12 kids a year in the last 4 or 5 years. So, like they have the 6th pick. I mean, maybe start making a move. But I think because of the cap, right? If you're going to trade your pick, yeah, if you're going to trade your pick, you're going to take on salary. I think how are you going to convince a contending team to give away, an expensive or effective piece for a high draft pick? I mean, we saw the Rangers do it with Stepan, right? When they did it with Stepan, getting D'Angelo and the 7th pick in return. That didn't work out all that well for the franchise.
Didn't work out all that well.
Yeah, but still, I think like that's the kind of trades that we always saw at the draft, and we haven't really seen it all that often. So I think to answer your question, I do think you'll see a lot of movement because of the uncertainty surrounding this draft.
Okay.
But the other key thing is the next 2 drafts are really deep, 22 and 23. And so if teams are going to be trading first-round picks, they're going to be trading the ones from this year, not next year's or 23. If you see a 2023 pick traded, that is basically Russian roulette right there, because you're basically trading away the chance at a future, McDavid in Konovic, or a future Ovechkin in Michkov, the kid from Russia. And I don't think any team wants to do that. So just something like a little side note to the deals that'll happen on draft day this year.
Okay, just going to the Devils real quick with their 4th overall pick because they're kind of local here. They do have a need on defense. Is taking Jack Hughes' brother Luke a stretch, or do you think that's just going to satisfy? Is that a stretch to satisfy the fans wanting to see 2 siblings play, or do you think they'll take him at number 4? Because I'm seeing some reports where he's not really in the top 5. You're seeing him just outside the top 5, and I'm wondering if that's a stretch at that point.
I think he's definitely top 5 caliber. I think he's definitely, worthy in this particular draft of being a 1st overall pick. I don't think it's that big of a stretch to take him 1st overall. If he's worthy of being 1st overall, because remember, Owen Power played in the USHL, and then he went on to Michigan. Luke Hughes played in the USHL, kind of with the NTDP, and although he was too young to go to college, I think that that program plays big time powerhouse programs in college schedule. And although they didn't do that this year, when Luke Hughes played against college guys, he looked pretty good. He looked like he's more than comfortable. So you can deduce that if Luke Hughes was a college freshman this year and he played for a loaded program like Michigan, which is where he's going to next year, so we might see Owen Power and Luke Hughes on the same team.
Oh boy.
Yeah, exactly. I think you could say if Luke Hughes is playing 20 minutes a night with all that firepower with the Wolverines, he's probably going to be just as impressive as Owen Power. But as far as the Devils fans, they've made up their minds. They made up their minds, and I'm trying to tell them, I agree, man. I'm with you, but, you can't do that. It's not fair to the scouts. It's not fair to the GM. Did you say, we'll take a lot
of pressure on everybody?
Yeah. Now, what my argument is that Jack Hughes is more important to this franchise than any player that they take this year. He's there. And then with all due respect to Nico Hischier, I think that how the Devils perform over the next 5 to 7 years is all based on what Jack Hughes becomes. Yes. And he had a really good year this year. The stats might not say it, but he looked really good this year, better than last year. And so I think that if Jack Hughes is and it's a tight family, they like each other. It's not like the brothers don't get along. So if Jack Hughes is hey, man, my kid brother, it's going to make me happy. It's going to make everyone happy. And they have New York ties too. The father's from, I think he's from Hicksville. I think
that's a quick drive over to Jersey.
Yeah. So there's a lot of variables that make sense. But again, I'm thinking like a fan right now. And so I don't want to disparage anything that the Devil Scouts have done, because they really can't go wrong with anyone that they take. I'm just trying to prepare Devils fans hey, listen, if you don't get the kid, there are other defensemen, there are other forwards. You're going to end up with a really good player. But to me, Luke Hughes makes the most sense.
At 4, you're ending up with a franchise player at that point anyway. Hey, let me ask you real quick. There's 2 goalies in this draft that could probably go within the top 14 or so picks. And in your mock draft that you did June 2nd on your website, you had Jesper Wallstedt and going to Detroit at 6 and Sebastian Kosa going to the Flyers at 13. Do you still believe that's where they fall? And for 2 goalies to be projected this high, who do they compare to in the NHL today?
Wallstedt is a stud. He is, and I'm not. This isn't a knee jerk. I'm just saying. Well, he's Swedish, big, so he's Henrik Lundqvist. His idol is Henrik Lundqvist. So if he's a goal and his idol is Henrik Lundqvist, he's going to model his game after him, and he's the same style. It's what they call an inside-out goalie. The goalie that starts, plays deep in the net. We always said, Henrik plays too deep in the net. And when Henrik tried to not play deep in the net to make us happy, he had his worst stretch of his career, and he went back to playing deep in the net, and he rejuvenated his play again and brought the Rangers, to almost to a Stanley Cup. So I think that if you look at Wallsted's track record, man, this kid made his junior league debut at 14, and it actually was the record. Usually kids are like 16, 17. He was 14,
Wow.
and the youngest guy before him was Victor Hedman. So, and this guy was essentially a number one for a quarter of the season for a really good team in Sweden, the adult team, the elite team, Luleå. So he's ready. He's ready. I wouldn't say he's ready to be a number one in the NHL, but he's checked all the blocks. He's ready to take the next step, to come to North America, to go to the AHL, whatever. He probably will Sweden a couple of years. He probably wants to win an SHL title. He got drafted in 2000. Remember, Henrik didn't come over until 2005. I think that any team would be smart to draft him. Because remember, if you're drafting right now in the top 10, because the lottery went the way it was supposed to go, chances are your goaltending sucked, right? Your goaltending was a problem. The Devils, the Devils maybe not, because they have a really good guy there in Blackwood. But Buffalo was horrid. Seattle doesn't even have a goalie. Anaheim, Gibson, but do they really have anyone down the pipe? But they have a couple of good prospects, but still unproven. Columbus, we thought that they had great goalie, and apparently they don't. Detroit's best goalie was Bernier. He's a UFA. Sharks had issues. The Kings need to move on from Jonathan Quick. So I could go on and on. Any of these teams would be smart to take him. Now, as far as Kosa goes, he's just a really big kid. He's kind of like I want to say he's kind of like a Ben Bishop when Ben Bishop, was at his prime, a peak, or maybe even like a Robin Lehner, where he's a big guy that covers the net a lot. He's quick. He's calm. You don't see a lot of herky-jerkiness with him. He's not swimming in the crease. And he plays for a really good team in the WHL. Edmonton was loaded, but I never got the impression that, and that's the one difference I think between Kosa and Wallstead, is that Wallstead played for a really good team, or at least a competitive team that's always been known to limit scoring chances and good defense. So like Luleå gives up on an average like 20 game, whereas there were games where Kosa, had to bail out the Oil Kings, the Edmonton Oil Kings, even last year as well. So I think I haven't mocked to the Flyers. The Flyers fans went bananas. He's like, we have Carter Hart. I'm like, yeah, but the dude was seeing a sports shrink this year.
I'm sure there was a heck of a reaction from the Flyer fans when they saw that.
Yeah, and I get it. They're protective of him, and I'm not going to blame everything on Hart. I mean, you got Alain Vigneault as a coach; he's a goalie killer. But I think that yes, this is a draft where you're going to see two guys definitely go in the first round. It's the first time that'll happen. I think it's like 2009 or 2010 or 2008 or something like that. And potentially both will go in the lottery somewhere between 1 and 15.
Okay, so getting to the Rangers, I know that the big need is the center. You have guys that don't like Strome as a second-line center. You have some guys that do. The third-line center, you kind of had Hedel in there a little bit, and like a revolving door almost. But do you think at 15 they go center? Is that definitely where they're going?
They better. This as a Ranger fan, it's like, it's such a glaring hole. Like you don't have any type of quality center prospects. Yeah, okay, we might have Morgan Barron. He might play center. Yeah, we have Paul Henriksen. I get it. There's a couple of guys here and there. Yeah, we have Hedel, but he also plays wing. So I think they need like a legitimate future number one two-way center, like a Mark Scheifele, like a Jonathan Taves. We all love Strome, right? He was a steal how they got him. We all love Mika. He bounced back again. He had a great second half. But, we need a center for when Alexei Lafreniere and Capo Caco are in their prime. Who's going to be their center? You look at Ovechkin, all the elite wingers in the game, they have a center. They have a quality center. At least 99.9% of them do. And the one cup that this franchise won was because of their center ice stepped, and then they had an elite number one center.
Absolutely.
So I think that they ignored it last year. They've always ignored it. It seems like they always go for defense and defense and defense. If this team takes a defenseman again, I mean, my goodness. But
I think I'll lose it. If they go defense again.
But Drury is now running the show, and he fired everybody. He wants him to run the show. I guess he's going to run the draft concurrent along with the other guy, Chris, I forgot his last name, JD's son-in-law. So they'll run the draft together. Okay. They fired the director of European scouting, Bob Rov. So maybe they felt like they Bob Rov had too much of an influence with the European kids, and Jury's more of a North American guy, so he wants the North American kids. I don't know. But listen, the Rangers drafted Kravtsov ahead of guys like Farabee and Wahlstrom, guys in the same division. Alva Wahlstrom is a regular for the Islanders, and Farabee is fantastic for the Flyers. And I love Kravtsov, by the way. I'm just trying to say, like, if we're going to use a
delay of him getting here. That's what leaves a bad taste in your mouth as a Ranger fan right now, is the delay of playing in the KHL and not coming here immediately. I get it.
Yeah, and plus the fact that if the owner is saying, apparently he's mad that they're not tough to play against, well, Joe Farabee and Alva Wahlstrom, for an example, or even Noah Dobson, the defenseman, whatever. Like, they are quote unquote tougher to play against because they're physical North American types, and Kravtsov is more of although Kravtsov is a really good defensive player too. I think he's underrated in that regard. But I think that the Rangers, to answer your question, I'm sorry I went on a tangent. Yes, they need to draft a center. And they have, I think, what do they have? They don't have a second this year, but they have a couple of thirds, a couple of fourths. So get the best center available and then address everything else later on.
Okay, so like we just touched on, the Rangers have started cleaning house, so to speak, with Drury at the top now. You had the video coach, Jerry Dineen, let go last week. There's been some shuffling around the scouting departments where people are either being reassigned with new responsibilities or they're leaving altogether. Brian Leach left the front office from his hockey operations advisory position. I know personally that Jim Ramsey's contract is up any day now, and I haven't heard if he re-signed yet. He could be leaving as well. Were you, and I guess I already know the answer to this, but I just want to hear you say it. Were you a fan of the whole John Davidson, Jeff Gorton, David Quinn firing? Did you think they needed one or two more seasons with the way this team was, being the youngest team in the league? Or did you think it was time for them to basically shuffle up everything and see where we go next year?
Nah, all good questions. It was premature. It's not fair. It wasn't fair. And there was a point right before the Rangers hit that tough stretch where they basically were essentially eliminated from the playoffs. The reason why the Rangers did not make the playoffs is because, number one, they were in the toughest division in hockey. All right. And the second, Boston, the toughest schedule out of anybody in the division, right? I think they played New Jersey and Buffalo the least amount of any team in that division. So when the Bruins were like, oh my God, look at the Rangers catching up, the Rangers are on our heels, and Ranger fans are like, oh my God, we might make the playoffs. The Rangers schedule got tougher and the Bruins schedule got easier. And it's not fair to say, like, well, our team can't compete with a team who's spending up to the cap and they're trading away first round and second round picks to get deadline acquisitions, whereas my team stood pat, and that's it. So, and they also improved, I guess, in a sense that the Rangers were like, they dropped the 9th spot on Pittsburgh. Like there were 2 games against the Islanders where they dominated every second of both games. And they ended up splitting because the Islanders got some lucky goal and they ended up winning in overtime. But my cousin's a big Islander fan. I'm texting him like, you're getting dominated by the youngest roster in the league right now. You know that. He's like, I don't know what the hell, this is horrible. And this was before the Islanders were in the conference final. So the idea, just because the Islanders were mad, back and beat us up. Okay, yeah, I get it, but it shouldn't be like a referendum, the state of the organization, and the whole thing with Wilson and firing and the Jiggy, the rumors why they left. It was a bad look for the organization. So the only reason why I would agree with it is that there was a lot of negative press surrounding this franchise for the first time in a long time. A lot of negative press. You can even go back to last year with the car accident with Shesterkin and Buchnevich right at the deadline. We're like, what? And now and then they signed Kreider, and then you had the D'Angelo fiasco, the Panarin fiasco. So many issues going on with the team. It felt, and then of course they had a bad start. David Quinn wasn't getting any wins out of the group early. So in that regard, I felt like, well, maybe you clean house, you bring in the new guy who will kind of like a semi-new guy, and maybe he'll fix things. And obviously, Glenn Sather likes Drury. And whoever Glenn Sather likes, Jim Dolan's going to like. So, that's basically what it is. So I hope everything works out, but I thought it wasn't fair to guys like Quinn and Gorton and And JD especially, man. JD's like,
Yeah.
we love JD. Like the guy cares, and we'll never know, I guess, the real story, but it was tough to deal with.
It left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths, and it's ridiculous. But Jeff Gorton, where do you think he ends up? Now, this is a guy that was making a lot of money, running an original six team, can basically write his own ticket anywhere in the league. Where do you think, let me ask you this. Do you think he takes a season or two off to just settle down and scout and wait for the right opportunity? And where do you think that opportunity is going to be when he finally says, I want to be a GM and president again?
Well, I think that, he's a Boston guy, and I really liked what he did with the Bruins. And I don't think the Bruins are necessarily looking for a change. I think maybe in the back of his mind, he'll always want to be, and I think he was temporarily like a Bruins GM, at least like as a fill-in.
Yep.
But he's got a great reputation. I think his record as a GM, you could tell that he didn't have that, I guess, experience to really swindle like people out of big deals. Like some of the moves he made were a little questionable, trade wise. But
he made a great deal with the Fox trade. I mean, this guy's probably going to basically win the Norris Trophy. If it's not this year, it's going to happen eventually. But I mean, that trade, the deal he makes on that end,
too.
All of a sudden,
was a great trade. Strong, like he had a couple of them.
Yeah, I mean, he made a few good ones. He made a few questionable ones. I get it.
But I do think that he's coveted. I think right now, you're looking at some of the teams. Anaheim, they've been losing, but they've had their guys there in place for a while. The Devils, it seems like they're all about Fitzgerald. So usually, you're not going to replace. It's rare to see like a winning team replace a GM, and we've had a lot of GM turnover. So a lot of these GMs in the league have only been there for 1 or 2 years.
Yep.
So I think Vancouver is something that you should probably keep an eye on. Because, Jim Benning, I think the fans have had it with him. And if the fans stop showing up to games, and Jim Benning has those 2 big RFAs, he's got to sign Pedersen and Hughes. And so if he is all the way up to the cap now because of them, and he's got to pay these horrible contracts, you might see him go. And that might be a good landing spot for a guy like Gordon, because you're walking in on an established core. JT Miller's already there. Yep. I'm just speculating right now. I mean, Edmonton's happy with Holland. It seems Detroit's obviously happy with Yzerman. Columbus with Kekalainen. I mean, I don't know how much longer he's going to last there, considering that they're struggling now. We'll see. But to answer your question, I think that Jeff Gordon is going to be probably in that top 3 of GMs to get called when openings pop up.
Okay, so just touching on the playoffs right now. You had Fleury makes a big mistake in Game 3. Vegas goes to Lehner in Game 4, and they pull out a miracle, and that series is now tied at 2. And then you have the Islanders and the Lightning. And listen, as a Ranger fan, I got a little uncomfortable after Game 1. And I'm a little uncomfortable now at 2-2. But how do you see both of those series finishing out? Who's going to the finals?
Well, here's the thing. Tampa has not lost back-to-back playoff games since they got swept by Columbus in 2019. That's a long time ago. I mean, it's almost like 40 games. So they have outstanding bounce-back ability, right? They're resilient. And so it's very tough for any team to beat them in back-to-back games. And that's really what I've been like telling people is that, hey, listen, this is going to go 7 because, if Tampa is going to lose a game, which they lost the last one, that now you're going to Tampa for Game 5, anything can happen. Tampa wins Game 5. Now they got to go into the Coliseum. It's going to be a madhouse. Sounders have the edge there. And now you're in Tampa for Game 7 where anything can happen. So I think that Tampa, if it boils down to a Game 7, they have that firepower. They can maybe say, you know what? Our top line is just better than your top line. Our best players are better than your best players. And maybe the whole grind it out, gritty thing, hustle effort. Like Tampa's no pushover in that department either. So maybe the Islanders will come closer than they did last year, show that they can hang. But, I'm always gonna put my money on the team with the experience that's won in that position before, where the Islanders have not. Okay. As far as Vegas, Montreal goes,
nobody said Montreal was coming out of that division to begin with, and now look at where they are. They're 2 games away from the finals.
It's a great story. I mean, we all know that why they're there. They're there because of Carey Price.
Oh,
they're
yeah.
not there because of coaching, because their coach wasn't even there. I mean, he's sick, and and
Yep.
they still playing great hockey. Vegas has had this issue before where a hot goalie can kind of stymie that offense. They got really lucky. They got really lucky in that last game.
Absolutely, they got lucky.
But then again, you could say that the Habs got with that ridiculous. Funny too how the broadcast was like, oh, he's been handling the puck so well, doink in the back of the net last minute of the game. Yeah, I think it'll. What we want to see as fans is we want to see Vegas and Tampa. I think that'll be a really great Stanley Cup final. I mean, who knows? It might even be a sweep. But I want to see that. I mean, Islanders Vegas I think would be pretty good as well. Islanders Montreal would be interesting, but in the end, I think it's going to be Vegas and the Island and Tampa Bay.
As a Ranger fan, I'm done with the Islanders. I don't want to see them anywhere beyond where they are right now. It's a little too hot under the collar. I'm done. Like, all right, they had their run. They've made 2 straight conference finals. They could both lose to Tampa. Tampa's the better team, and let's be done with it. But they get to the finals against Vegas or Montreal, and I'm going to sweat every game because obviously, being from New York, I got all that family and friends that just after every game, I'm getting a text message. Did you see this? Did you see this? This isn't a pushover. This isn't a series that's going to end 1-2-3. So, it's got me nervous, I got to say.
No, I got it. I feel the same way.
All right, Steve. I want to thank you for coming on the show. This was great. It was very entertaining. It was very informative. Steve can be found on Twitter at The Draft Analyst. His website is all things hockey, honestly. It's a lot of good stuff. If you go to thedraftanalyst.com, you can see everything he's got going on there. There's podcasts and all other stuff where you can hear everything he's got to say about the prospects and the upcoming NHL Draft. Steve, I want to thank you for coming on the show, and let's go Rangers, all right?
Yeah, likewise, man. This was great. Really appreciate it, and thanks for having me on.
Thank you very much. We'll talk soon. All right, guys, there you have it. That was fun. Anytime I could talk hockey with anybody, it's definitely a good time. So let's get into current events real quick. Over the weekend, just before the weekend on Friday, Dave Portnoy's Twitter was suspended on Friday night for 2 hours, and the hashtag Free Portnoy started, and soon thereafter, the suspension was lifted. The suspension was due to Portnoy saying something about dropping his nuts on someone's head, which, not for nothing, I've seen a lot worse on Twitter, and a lot goes unnoticed. A lot more probably does go noticed. And for someone like him to be suspended for something like that, I just don't get it. I guess Twitter's looking to make a statement with, their verified people or their people that have big followings. Portnoy's got over 2.5 million followers on Twitter. I don't get it. When they were asked for a comment, they really didn't make a comment about it. So I'm not really sure what the final reasoning was for the suspension and then the lifting. You had John Rahm won his first major championship, the U.S. Open, after being shut down the last 2 weeks with a positive COVID test. He made some serious putts on 17 and 18 to clinch it. Moving over to baseball, got Shohei Ohtani is just killing it this year. 23 homers, 54 RBIs, 10 stolen bases. That's just at the bat. When he's pitching, he's 3-1 with a 2.70 ERA. He's got 73 Ks. Definitely an early MVP candidate. It also was announced on Friday that he will participate in this year's Home Run Derby. He's the only person so far to commit to that. Definitely excited to see him in the Home Run Derby this year. And for Angels fans, I think you need to start worrying about them wasting the primes of Ohtani and Trout. They're a 500 team right now. They're in a division that, really, you have the Oakland Athletics leading the way. I would think with an owner who's flashy and likes to spend money, you got these two guys to build around. You better start getting the train on the tracks, so to speak, with the Angels and competing. Also, not even the All-Star break. Arizona is 26 games behind the San Francisco Giants. What is going on there? I got to say, you got to keep an eye on things there because they might be competing for the worst overall record in baseball ever when the season is all said and done. Getting to our baseball standings real quick. In the AL East, you have Boston with a half-game lead on the Rays. Yankees are still 4.5 back. AL Central, you got the White Sox with a 2.5 game lead over the Indians. Out West, you have Oakland and Houston both tied for first. In the NL East, you have the Mets with a 4-game lead over the Phillies. The NL Central, you got the Brewers and Cubs both tied for the top spot there. In the West, you have San Francisco leading the Dodgers by 1.5 games. And like I said, we're not even at the All-Star break. Look at that 26-game lead on Arizona. It's just shocking. Over to the NBA. Got the Bucks defeat the Nets in overtime at Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. And the Nets were a big disappointment this year. I really thought, along with a lot of other people, that they were definitely going to be in the finals, if not win the whole thing. You got the Atlanta Hawks. They knocked off the Sixers in Game 7 to advance to the Eastern Conference Finals against the Milwaukee Bucks. Trae Young is having a playoffs for the ages. Everywhere he goes, he's public enemy number one. Can't wait to see what happens with Milwaukee next. Of the 4 remaining teams that are left, none of them have won a title since the NBA-ABA merger in 1976-77. You got the Suns with a 1-0 lead in the Western Conference Finals against the LA Clippers. Game 2 is tomorrow. There are no games tonight in the NBA. And Hawks-Bucks will start on Wednesday night. Finally, tonight, I want to do a new segment, which is going to be the OTC stock watch list. Just a heads up real quick. This discussion in no way suggests that you should buy any of the stocks mentioned without looking into them and doing your own research. My suggestions are just my opinion. I'm not a financial advisor, so please trade wisely. The top 5 OTC picks for this week, and we'll touch upon them next week if anything big has happened with them. If you look at the stock tickers KAST and KATX. Both of these are OTC stocks. They are both reverse merger plays. The same company, which is Acropolis Partners, were granted custodianship of both of these. There are reports that they have companies lined up for both of them as well. They have some money, and they're going to move fast. Both have great share structures, and get ready, they're going to move very easily. Both have not been diluted, and both are considered clean shells. KAST is at 17 cents, and KATX is at 0079. Another one is CGUD. It's another custodianship play. There is a hearing I'm hearing this week on Thursday, and keep an eye on news for that. If custodianship is granted, it should move. It's currently trading at 0.0095. Another stock is AYPY, another one with a merger meeting at the end of the month on June 28th. That company currently has a sleep apnea wristband that could replace the CPAP mask. So that's something definitely to keep an eye on. It's currently trading at 0.005, and it is pink current. So that's a plus. Finally, something I want to get out now, but I'm going to get into more next week, is TGGI. They have some merger news coming. They have some hefty price targets. If you look them up, they're talking that this could be worth a couple of dollars down the line. Like I said, I'll get into more next week, but this is a company that is pink current as well, and it's currently trading at 0.004. Our next show will be this Thursday, June 24th at 7 p.m. We're going to have Buffalo Hanks, Brent Hanks, on the show. He is Jeff Platt's broadcast partner. We had Jeff on episode 2. Buffalo Hanks will break down and dissect the Hellmuth-Negreanu high-stakes duel 2 round 3 matchup, which is taking place this Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern on Poker Go. We'll talk to Buffalo Hanks about the Buffalo Bills. We'll touch upon Vegas and the poker scene. He's got a show called No Gamble, No Future with Jeff Platt. That's on YouTube. We'll get into that and much, much more. As always, our show can be found on our YouTube and Twitch channels at the E.A.T podcast. And tomorrow, the audio from this will be on Spotify. Until Thursday night, good night, everybody.